Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Not sure when you're watching this, but welcome to a session on virtual reality and social skill development. My name is Sean Smith.
And I'm Maggie Mosier.
And we'll introduce ourselves a little bit more formally in just a moment. But hopefully you're interested in this issue of social skill deficits or social emotional difficulties. And now some of you might be asking, why social skills? And if you are asking why social skills, I guess my response, Maggie, would be, I hope you've had a really good sleep the last year. It's been a major issue. And Maggie, walk us through these issues in terms of social skill deficits.
Yeah, the COVID-19 pandemic has really made it pretty evident that social emotional learning is something that we need for all students, but it is a part of every single student disability category has an aspect of social emotional learning that's a part of it. But the UDL framework that we're going to be talking about is beneficial in bringing technology into that curriculum design decisions for social emotional learning. So we're going to kind of get into that. But why? Why do we need social emotional learning? Well, without it, we can't be academically achieving. It helps us with our ability to collaborate, develop relationships. Kids who struggle with social emotional learning don't or aren't accepted by their peers and teachers as readily as those who are. It causes aggression, depression, anxiety, and loneliness when you're not able to understand and perform social emotional skills. And it also, if you have social emotional learning, you have greater vocational functioning and are more likely to get a job and maintain a job. So without it, you tend to have underemployment or not to be employed at all. So it really is important throughout the child's life. And technology, we've been told, especially these last few years, is crucial in teaching social emotional learning. Obviously, a lot of our students are on the computer at all points in time right now, and so they're not out there interacting with other students and learning through what we used to be doing. So that also kind of causes a deficit. But adolescents with autism spectrum disorder, specifically, we have some other students with learning disabilities and behavioral disorders who also struggle a lot with social emotional learning. But those with ASD actually say that instruction from adults and peers tends to be unpleasant, pressuring, and sometimes really intrusive. It can cause a lot of anxiety to be taught by an adult or peer what you're doing incorrectly socially. However, what we're finding is that same direct instruction when presented through technology tends to be engaging and motivating, and there's a lot less stress and anxiety as they're performing those skills. So social emotional learning is a huge part of our students' days.
So Maggie set us up for kind of what we're going to talk about today. And what are we going to talk about today, folks, is, well, these issues in terms of social emotional learning, the social skill deficits are a challenge. And so what we want to do today is we want to talk to you about a product that we've created for virtual reality, and we'll get into that in just a moment, that aligns, as Maggie mentioned, to the UDL framework. Actually, it was a core component as we looked at our design. And it aligns with, of course, the needs and hopefully solutions for skill development and understanding in the area of social skill deficits. So before we get started, though, I said who we were briefly, but let me introduce the team. Part of the team is here. So again, Sean Smith, a faculty member here at the University of Kansas, and I'm fortunate to be the principal investigator on this project, which has been funded by the U.S. Department of Education. And Maggie, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit more, since it's more than just simply Maggie Mosier.
Yeah, so I am a doctoral student at the University of Kansas, and I am the social skill content strategist for Voice, which pretty much means I help coordinate all of the social skills that come in and all of the teachers and students who work with those social skills and how to put them into our Voice program.
Which a definition is the last 2 years she's lived it, eaten it, drank it, slept it, whatever. Okay, now we have another couple of colleagues not with us today. Amber Rowland, she's a co-PI on this, and Adam Carrion is a key doctoral student on this. As well as Bruce Fry, and we have Harriet Dawson, who also is part of the team. So we have a nice team of collaborators here at the University of Kansas as well as elsewhere. But let's get started into the actual product. So Voice itself, and you're looking at that wording, that lettering, and saying that's not Voice, that's VA, it's an acronym. But we see it as a voice in terms of students need a voice, as Maggie was indicating, in this whole social skill component. And yes, it's residing in virtual reality. And we'll talk a little bit more about the components in the virtual reality in just a moment, but let's start off with the area of social skills and our social skill domains we're focused in on. And this is the heart of what Maggie's been key on, and so she'll introduce it.
Yeah, so we all know social skills is a really complex process. And depending on what age group you're talking about, where, what location, what diversity, what culture, Social skills vary a lot. And so we tried to figure out, how do we figure out what middle schoolers need as far as social skills?
That's a
Where do we
focus.
find
We
them?
have focused on middle schools, haven't we? Yep. But
Yeah.
we've also seen what upper elementary as well as into lower high school as well. But you're right, our key has been middle schoolers.
So we did look, and when we looked at all age levels as far as the people we asked. We talked to speech language pathologists, we talked to special education teachers, occupational therapists, school psychologists, state level representatives. We pretty much tried to get
Family
everybody in there
members.
from
Yep.
a number of states.
Yep.
And so all of those people, we kind of gave a survey to figure out what are they teaching? Where are they finding their social skills? What curriculum are they using? What assessments are they using? And really what we found was a trend in that most people were looking at social skills through assessments. So they were determining what social skills to teach based off of what they were measuring. So how do we teach a student? Well, we assess and we figure out what they know, and then we teach them based off of what they don't know. So that was the number one way all of these people were teaching social skills, but the assessments varied. And so we looked at the top 20 assessments. We pulled out the top 20 assessments and looked at them to try to figure out what are the social skills that are important. And so based off of those 20 assessments, we located about 170 some skills. And from those 170 skills, we then took those skills to focus groups of teachers and asked them, are these all the skills that you see needing for a student to be competent? And we found a few extra skills, mostly in digital learning and digital citizenship. We hadn't really considered, neither had the assessments, we hadn't considered that social skills, but today's culture and learning, it's a social skill. If you can't be a great digital citizen, you are struggling socially with your peers. So we added those skills, the digital citizenship skills from the focus groups, and then we met with a bunch of experts in autism from different universities to see, different schools as well, to see, are we missing anything? Did we catch the major assessments? Did we miss any skills? They helped us to see that we could combine a few skills and that some of the skills actually fit in multiple domains. So some skills are mentioned twice, but in different ways. And then based off of all of that, we ended up with 180 some skills to assist our students in these 10 domains. And the domains are self-awareness and advocacy, which kind of look at a student's ability to self-control, a student's ability to understand what they're feeling and doing, a little bit of that 5-point scale, that expected and unexpected behavior. Then we looked at self-regulation skills, and that was a little bit more going into that, I can advocate for myself, I understand what I'm feeling, now can I regulate those emotions? So after self-regulation, we looked at critical thinking and problem solving, and that's being able to set up short-term goals, long-term goals. Can I follow a process? Executive and organizational skills. Again, can the student follow a daily routine? Receptive communication, that had a lot to do with boundaries and personal space and what we used to call our bubble, and understanding body motions and movements and facial expressions. And then expressive communication and relationship skills and social comprehension all kind of fit in there as well, with a lot of asking to join in, a lot of sharing, managing some of that peer pressure. School, home, and community tended to be mostly things that would happen with adults and citizenship skills. And then self-care and safety had a lot to do with risky situations and what to do in fire drills and different situations that come up. So that's kind of our 10 domains in a nutshell.
And so, as Maggie shared in this next slide, Maggie, we put it up here. It's busy, it's overwhelming, and we'll get into the scenarios in just a moment, but reinforce that idea that our scenarios embed what skills are embedded within that.
Yeah, so it's a complex process. We have, from the 180 skills, we also have 140 some scenarios, and they're in different domains. So this is kind of a look at, here's a scenario number, here's what the scenario is titled or teaches, this is the domain it's in, and then here's the actual chunk that it belongs to. So each skill has individual skills within it that go in different domains. The reason being, we didn't want this to be something where I'm just directly teaching you this specific skill and then there's no actual use of that skill, there's no practice with that skill, there's no skills that align with those skills in the same scenario. We wanted it to all be together. So one scenario might have 4 or 5 skills, one in self-awareness and advocacy, but one in expressive communication and one in receptive communication. So the skills that all kind of align are in that same scenario. We also wanted to make sure that students have multiple opportunities to practice this skill and to see this skill in different settings and in different with different peers or adults around. So the same skill may appear a few times in different levels. So we started off with an easy way to teach that emotion recognition based off of the way you're looking or the way you're the facial expressions or based off of what you're saying. But then as it gets harder, we do it more towards, can you understand what a person's feeling based off of what's going on in the environment? based off of what other people are coming in and introducing. So it gets a little more complicated as they go along. There are also multiple opportunities in every scenario to measure those skills. And when we measure that skill, we look at not just if the student knows the skill, but what is the natural consequence if I get this wrong? So what's going to happen if I say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing? Immediately when they click that, it goes to that natural consequence. And then they can feel, you know, what it would be like. And then they go back to reteaching before they get an opportunity to choose an answer again. So there's a lot kind of embedded into every scenario.
So let's break down. I mean, Maggie gave us a big, thorough overview. So let's break it down. All right. So voice itself, first of all, you know, okay, I'm getting the understanding of the social skills and the depth that Maggie's talking about. Let's get into a little bit more particulars. First of all, the individual, and we'll talk again about the device in just a moment, but they're basically experiences that we've set up, as Maggie indicated, they're scenarios. They are basically independent. The individual will start into the experience, into the narrative, into the conversation, the discussion, the experience, and then they navigate through, and then they're presented, as Maggie was indicating, different places where they're asked questions, where they're having to respond. As we have indicated, we are focused primarily on individuals with autism, more of a need of level 1 supports, as well as individuals with learning disabilities, particularly individuals that have been identified with social skill challenges. Now, as we've been mentioned technology-wise, let's be clear here. Virtual reality, many people think of headsets, and we already have some images that you've seen with folks wearing headsets. And yes, we've developed this for the Oculus. It's very immersive. Maggie, as well as another graduate student we mentioned, Adam, are doing data collection right now on the levels of immersion and the levels of engagement and interest, persistence, perception, things of that nature. But it's also available on the iPad. It's also available on the Google Chrome. Less immersive, but also that focus on availability. So all those virtual reality, please understand, it's just not sitting within a headset. So the basics, as Maggie mentioned, 140 different scenarios with a number of different skills across a variety of different environments. So Maggie, let's see, we have the gymnasium. What other environments do we have?
We have the bus, we have the school, we have the library, we have the locker rooms, we have the hallways, we have field trips. So they get to go on different field trips and see. We have the playgrounds or the lunch cafeteria, as you can see behind me.
Yeah.
A lot of great.
And then with it, the student then goes through an experience. They interact with avatars, preset avatars. It is not live, folks. Well, Sean, why isn't it live? Well, a lot of different challenges with live, but particularly what we wanted is a very controlled subsequent narrative that is aligned with the language, as Maggie's already indicated, that a student potentially would be exposed to, potentially would be thinking about, and also align with how the literature lays out these types of narratives and these types of experiences. So by doing it in that controlled manner, we know the individual is experiencing what is expected. We know the individual then is given an opportunity to respond in the manner that would be most aligned with their perceived challenges, but also the way we would see them needing that skill and understanding to be developed. And that was very purposeful on our part. And if you're thinking, well, gosh, what does it align with most likely, or most likely in terms of the evidence? Well, maybe social narratives in terms of that connection. So there's a number of scenarios. So walk us through that in terms of we get started there, and we have the screen here of what, I think this is expressive communication, Maggie.
Yeah, so every domain has a trophy that the student will earn when they have completed that domain. And every domain has a number of skills in there in a number of scenarios. So the expressive communication domain has 25 different scenarios. And these scenarios vary from one you'll see here is shooting baskets in the gym, trying to ask for turn taking. Some of them are in the classroom, not interrupting your peers when they're talking, staying on conversation, understanding how to enter a conversation, how to exit a conversation. So just different places. They take place everywhere from the library. Like you were saying, there's so many different environments, but there's also so many different students that are involved. So you have opportunities to do these things with your peers, but also the principal and the cafeteria workers and the secretary and the bus driver. So you've got a lot of different options within each scenario.
Now let's take a look here. So we have one, I think this is the cafeteria, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So on the cafeteria, when you first come in, there are multiple options at the bottom. You'll see the raise hand option. All of these 3 buttons are throughout the whole entire program. So even though it doesn't make sense in a cafeteria to raise your hand, it's there because it's available throughout the program. It does make sense during class or different things to raise your hand to ask a question. However, if the student's constantly raising their hand throughout class, it will allow for the student to get a prompt saying, really, let's give somebody else a turn, to also give them an idea of how much is too much and how much interaction. The same thing with verbal responses. If the student's constantly interrupting by trying to talk, it will give them a prompt saying, hey, someone's talking, why don't we wait our turn? And then it'll give them 3 different prompts before it turns off and doesn't allow them to keep hitting it. And then it'll turn back on in the next scenario. That final button, the help button, is one of my favorites. It gives the student some options to remember throughout the program of things you can do, like taking deep breaths or asking for a break, or using some of your skills, that 5-point skills, thinking about what level you're on and what tools your student in your school decides to use. So it's pretty programmed so that no matter what you use within your school, that student understands, okay, I'm on this level, this is what I need to do. In my school, this is how we handle that. So it gives them some just kind of prompts. And then you'll see over on the side that'll say view of the rest of the room. That's because on an iPad or anything, you're clicking to move. But when you have that head mounted display, you just turn around and it's there. So it gives them multiple options. You can always go back to the main menu, which is at the top if you want to start a different scenario or start over or do something over again. That button in the middle starts the scenario just by going in. When you're on a head mounted display, you literally just walk in and the scenario begins. But on an iPad, you click it. And then the top is a progress bar. Why that's important is it helps the student know where they are within the scenario. So usually you start out at the beginning and you get some instruction, then you continue on and you have some questions that are asked of you to see if you understood that instruction. And as you go on, that progress bar continues, not just for the scenario, but now we have one below it that you'll see. In this one, it's hard to see, but it's in yellow. And that's for how far you're in the domain. How much are you progressing in that whole domain? Where are you at? So it gives them a little bit of an understanding of how much they have to go to learn these skills and where they're at currently.
And then as they move forward, as we mentioned earlier, in each scenario, there may be several times where we stop them and prompt them with, okay, now let's kind of come up with some solutions here. And so this screen shares.
Yeah, our next screen gives us an understanding of, okay, this would be like a question that was asked of them. Now here are their options for choosing what they're going to respond. And in those responses, they can click that little blue speaker and it'll read it aloud to them to tell them what that response says, or they can click on the response. When they click on the response, it immediately gives them what would occur if that was the response they gave. So the students will immediately give them that natural consequence or positive feedback if they got the response correct. If they got it incorrect, after that natural consequence, it goes right back to reteaching, and then they have the option to choose again. Why this is helpful for teachers is it gives us that opportunity to multiple times have that instruction provided, but it also gives them an idea of what would happen if I did this. So it's helpful in a lot of different ways for that instructional piece, because you're getting a little bit of direct instruction. Here's that, how you do it, but you're also getting observational learning. So if I did this incorrectly, this is what would happen. And this is how I would go about changing my behavior.
Now, the key component, what you're going to hear in just a moment, folks, is a short little video snippet, but you're going to hear a narrator. And that's a key component to this, as Maggie was just indicating. The narrator is kind of walking us through this process. So I'm going to get started here, Maggie, and you kind of feel free to offer some observations here. So I'm going to move this forward, folks. It's clearly an image where someone's walking in the hallway. I think there's some bumping into or someone's getting in the way of. And, well, here, let me kind of move it forward just a bit here. And
challenge him to move.
Here we go.
I'm not moving.
So the student now is given a choice to respond back to.
Just standing near a person and looking at the floor without saying what you need can confuse that person. Brian can't read your mind. You need to tell him what you need.
So here's some choices again, what he needs to think about reflection-wise.
What the heck? You could have asked me to move.
So basically what you're seeing here, folks, a couple things, and I'll let Maggie jump in, is right at the top here is that progress bar that Maggie was mentioning. Now we're into the second of 5 components. What you saw, and I was kind of talking over, was a student in front of the locker. The narrator is kind of giving the situation. The avatar is responding to the student, and of course the student themselves, the user, had a choice to select various options. And when they did select various options, certain activities, responses would take place, both the narrator as well as the avatar. Maggie, I've taken most of your thunder. Other thoughts in terms of this?
No, yeah, that's exactly right. It also helpful in this specific scenario. So they're in the locker room and they have this option of moving, but it also continues throughout the scenario of a little bit of understanding of what is and what isn't bullying, and what is a normal response and what's not a normal response, so what's expected and what's not expected, and how that student feels afterwards based off of those responses.
And one of the things I want to reinforce, and Maggie's going to get to this in just a moment when we start talking about the framework and engagement, but this is the type of experience where, yes, this is what the student's looking at, but again, as you can see with the arrows here, the student can also, take a look at what's happening to their side, take a look behind them, and in the actual virtual reality, when they're wearing the wearable, so to speak, they can move down the hall, they can move around the hall, they can, again, feel like they do feel like as if they're there in the experience, in the hallway, in the locker room, wherever it may be. And then, of course, there is something in front of them scenario-wise that they do need to respond to. So it's just not simply as controlled as that video share, if that helps. All right, so let's pop into the framework, because many of us are here with UDL-IRN to think about the framework. Now, I imagine many of you, as you've been listening to Maggie, particularly, and seeing some of these visuals, are like, oh, I see the principle over here. Oh, I see this component over here. I see this guideline over here. We thought we'd do a little bit more connection here, so explicitly we're sharing with you ways that, in terms of the 3 principles and the overall framework, including guidelines and checkpoints, how we took those into play in our initial design and our continued work. Now, of course, real briefly, in terms of the Universal Design for Learning framework, Maggie, myself, and the entire team, we've been really focused on reducing those barriers, right? That fence that's still there, but now it's transparent, has been at the kind of the forefront. We have certain limitations, and let me explain some of our limitations. In our world, and I can't speak for Maggie, but in my world, I would have everyone use the wearable. I think it's awesome. I think it offers a lot of activity. But you know what? Some learners, having that over their face, that may be too much. But also the reality is the cost and access. So of course, we're going into the Chromebook and we're going into the iPad. That in and of itself offers some limitations for us from a design perspective, but we're always looking at reducing the barriers for those individuals when we're designing all the different elements. And so we'll reinforce as we go along. This other visual, the Universal Design for Learning framework with the bicycles, tries to reinforce that not only are we looking at it vertically in respect to the 3 principles, but we've also looked at it from an access perspective. And access in terms of the processing, in terms of the language, in terms of the understanding, in terms of the context of the social skill and the challenge of the social skill, et cetera, but also access in terms of how they're accessing information. And Maggie did, I think, a really nice job of emphasizing why we have the tools at the bottom and the use of the tools that dominate throughout every single scenario is one of the examples of us of making sure we provide consistent and constant access. And of course, we also are at a point where with the 10 speed, we want a lot of independence. And so we want the individual to feel a level of independence as they use, but also as they develop skill and understanding for subsequent practice and generalization, which we'll get to. All right, so let's talk about representation. Many of us are already there. There's a visual for reinforcement. But for our purposes, when we're thinking about representation, let's break this down. First of all, we have our avatars, as you saw. There's that visual interaction. There's the auditory cues. There's the response. The recording, we use actual students, and some of those students are very much aligned with the type of responses you're going to hear from a middle schooler. We have the text, we have the auditory, there's much more than that. We have the various settings, and the settings, as we've tried to emphasize already, are very much as realistic as possible. And by the way, you may be looking in the background of Maggie right now and saying, does that really look like a cafeteria? Our feedback over the years have been from students is the fact that, yeah, they very much feel that they are there in those different experiences. And of course, it's a narrative story to offer context and a variety of different things. So for us, we're building connections. We're highlighting patterns. We're offering alternatives, both visual and auditory. We're sharing information in a variety of different ways. You can go on down the list in terms of multiple means of representation. On the demonstration and the voice in terms of action and expression, we're doing a number of different things. Here again is a visual as a reminder to us of what we're trying to focus in on. And for us, I've offered it 2 columns. The first column is what we're offering in voice. The second column is that reminder of what we're trying to do from a Universal Design for Learning framework. So let me emphasize a few things. You've seen the multiple choice. You've seen the auditory that goes along with it. You saw, as Maggie shared, the opportunity for verbal response or raise hands if they need questions and things of that nature. But we also had that progress bar, and that progress bar has been a key component to visualize where I am, to understand where I am, where I've been, and where I'm about to complete. And that's a key component as they move along. We also have things organized, and we haven't done this justice, but if you remember that thorough explanation of the different domains and the skills, there's a sequence to it. And our expectation is that students don't complete all 10 domains. Rather, there actually is an assessment prior to voice where students are actually, with their instructors, they make a determination of where to begin and where to end. So it may be beginning within a domain and ending within a domain, so therefore not completing everything because it's aligned with the variability of the individual, so that they're actually engaging what they need, and then therefore they can demonstrate skill and understanding in those areas. And then we'll talk about the progress monitoring here in just a moment, but that's a key component in respect to both for the student and the instructor as they move through to better understand and guide them in their action expression. And so, Maggie, if you would, kind of reinforce the type of data that progress monitoring tool is collecting behind the scenes that's immediately available to the teacher, and if the teacher wants to share, available to the student.
Yeah, one of the things I want to piggyback on what you just said too before we even get to that was that screening tool. One of the things I love about it is you said learner variability. It provides the option to specifically state which skills that learner needs and to go directly there. But it also gives the option of saying how important are each of these skills. And the very important skills are the ones I'm going to do first. And it orders based off of skill development. So developmentally, here's how I should go. And important wise, this is what my teacher says I really need to work on to keep my friends and to keep paying attention in the classroom, or this is what my parent says, or this is what I say is really important for me to feel like I'm included in my classroom environment. And I love that part of that screener because it really helps us.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Yep.
And then the progress monitoring tools. So all of the different options, yes, it collects data and it tells you the number of incorrect and correct, just like any progress monitoring tool. It tells us, though, the amount of time in the scenario, how many times the student had to go back for reteaching, how many times the student needed to have some natural consequences before they understood the skill. It'll give some examples to teachers of how quickly they, so if I was just clicking, we have some of those students who get into program and just click and click and click, as opposed to actually going through the program. It'll tell the teacher that right away and red flag it. Okay, they're not really paying attention, they need to go back. Or one of the things that I think is really impressive about voice is we did a lot of research before on other virtual reality programs that maybe don't teach social skills, but are virtual reality programs that teach something academic. And what we learned from that was there are certain things that are extremely distracting for students. Like one program actually chose the student's actual environment, their actual school, and put them in that school. And that was too distracting. So if it's exactly like my actual school, I'm going to look for where is that clock that's normally there on the wall? Why isn't it there? I'm going to perseverate on certain things. And so having an environment that's close to a school, but that's not my actual school is helpful. So things like that, as far as speed and completion, when we had students who had their actual school in some of these other programs, they spent so much time focused on external things and not focused on instruction. And that will show up in that speed and completion portion for that teacher. And then it identifies where the student is in the system. And one of my favorite parts of the progress monitoring is the teacher can click exactly on what they're doing and see what skill they're on now and how they're doing in that skill. How many times have I had to have reteaching in this skill before I learned this? And when am I getting it again in a different scenario?
And with that, folks, we're doing, there's a variations, back to the UDL framework, we are providing this data in a variety of different ways. And by the way, what you see right here is everything from trend lines to bar graphs to a variety of bar graphs across time. And actually right now we are getting feedback from a variety of educators to say, what are primary, what are secondary, and how do you want this organized? But again, for us, it's critical, one, the instructors have it in a manner that's meaningful to them, that's just in time to them, back what Maggie just mentioned in terms of being able to see where the student is, but also for potential data walks with the students to further have them further understanding of their success, where potential some of the challenges are, et cetera, et cetera. And that, in a way, of course, that leads right into the idea of data walks and engagement. We know that's a key component in terms of formative assessment, can allow for further engagement by the learner, and Maggie's going to take us there.
Yeah, we wanted to start out by reminding again that technology isn't synonymous with UDL. Just because I'm using technology does not mean I'm using universal design for learning. But there are things within the UDL framework that help with the curriculum develop technology in a way that it becomes UDL accessible. And that's kind of what we're looking at in this program, is it was intentionally designed to be engaging and to use that active curriculum. We've used a lot of students from different places. Even the voices in the program are actual student middle schoolers, and they're actual adults, and they're from different backgrounds and different ethnicities. And that provides that feeling of, oh, this is a real kid that's using my same language and their same voices, and makes it real and more motivating. So the different things it does support that student interest by providing some really fun field trips and some things that really happen in the bus that aren't always clean and pretty. So different options that keep them interested. Motivational aspects, they have a lot of ability to explore, to be in different locations, just even shooting basketballs. I know some students, again, there's a time limit to how long you can sit in the gym and shoot baskets, but it is fun. It's engaging, and they're at the same time while they're shooting baskets, they're learning turn taking, they're learning how to accept a peer, how to help with bullying when a peer is being made fun of for not getting a shot correct, or how to get involved and ask for help when you need it. So just different things that are more in a motivational way. And persistence, there is immediate feedback and natural consequences right away. So I don't have to wonder, did I get that right? Am I doing this correctly? It takes some of that anxiety and stress out of the way. Those game features that you talked about, the bar, the trophies, a lot of interaction and interactive feedback with that reteaching. And there's a lot of places to explore. So the ability to try different things in a really safe space. Even one of the field trips has dogs, and one of the students I'm working with right now really loves the dogs in this program because they're like, oh, that's so motivating. I have a dog. And then we get into all of these conversations about their life and how this fits their life and how they learned something that they didn't expect, that's helping them with their specific dog training up there.
And we could, I guess, nerd out, so to speak, with our developers, and they're not nerds, they're awesome folks, but that aspect of being able to shoot a basketball and technically get it so that they can shoot a basketball within the system, or as they explore their backpack or their lunch, those small things, when we look at them in terms of, okay, so they can shoot a basketball, the very engaging element for the student, were critical for us. And from a digital perspective and creation perspective, it was a bit of a lift, but we felt it was worth it for those elements of engagement. Sorry to interrupt there, Maggie.
No, even that, on that same thing, I'm going to talk about choice and engagement.
Yeah, choice and engagement, sure.
In that same aspect, one of our developers has a son with autism, and he's open to saying that. And he was really helpful, and he wanted it to be real with our background noises, because that does affect his student and his child, those background noises. And how do we help them to accept those background noises in this program, but also provide enough of a decrease of those background noises that they can learn. So focus on, and that's one of the great things we're learning, virtual reality, all levels of virtual reality, the immersive and non-immersive, from all of this background research we're doing, is helpful because it does allow that student to focus in a way that they can't necessarily focus in the natural environment because of all the background. So having a little bit of that, enough of that to help them to kind of zone it out, but not too much that it's overwhelming. And so looking at engagement in that choice, we do know that allowing students choice helps improve things. I mean, there's all these studies in targeted language responses, how it helps with task engagement, how it helps with decreasing really behaviors that compete with learning, how it helps decrease student resistance to whatever you're trying to teach in that process of teaching. So we know all of these things. We also know that students with ADHD and autism and emotional disturbances, really, it decreases problems behavior when I'm given choices, when I'm given some say in what I get to learn and when I get to learn it. So giving those options, again, will increase that engagement. And then on this next slide, the multiple means of engagement, this kind of walks you through. So again, National Center on UDL in 2014 gave teachers some guidelines on how to help students self-regulate, sustain effort and motivation so that they stay engaged and interested. And these are the guidelines that actually align perfectly with the VOICE program. So some of the guidelines are just listed here. Variety in activities. It integrates the learner's different experiences, different backgrounds. There are lots of places you can go and do things. It asks the learner to engage it with a real audience, feels like real people that they're talking with. In fact, a lot of the studies that have gone on in the past, some of them say that they can't actually determine the difference between the real environment and the actual environment. So that was something that when you had the head-mounted display had to be talked about with students. Is this isn't real. This feels real, but it's not real. And the differences between that. And then opportunities for learners to give input and to make decisions. It divides, you had talked about this earlier, all of those long-term goals into really small objectives. Okay, this is what I want to learn. And it tells the student when they learn it, that progress monitoring. We know exactly when they mastered that, and that causes engagement and excitement because I got a skill that I needed in order to do well in my classroom and with my peers. There are activities that give a lot of social, cultural context. There's a lot of experiential learning, real world application. There's examples of real life situations. Even one of the things we were talking about is we're looking now at the voice button on when you can speak. Well, some of the stuff in the classroom talks about your family and your background, and some of the students are sharing about their family and their background, then it gives the student a chance to do the same and to interact in that way. So you get to have some real life situations from different people and different backgrounds. And then there's links to existing tasks. So yes, it builds on each other, but there's opportunities throughout every scenario, what we call reinforced. So I learned this skill 10 scenarios ago, but it's being reinforced through observational learning. I'm seeing other people in this scenario do the skill I just learned 4 scenarios ago. So I see it in different contexts and I'm getting some reinforcement of the skills I just learned. And then the tasks are constructed with varying degrees, and there's always that frequent feedback in a timely manner for students. So that keeps them engaged.
So overall, and we've run out of time, so I'm going to mention the advisor here in just a moment, but as you can see from the details and what we've offered, as well as what we haven't offered in terms of the level of depth on both the multiple means of representation and, of course, action and expression, and, of course, we just talked about engagement. This was a cornerstone, the backbone, the foundation, however you want to describe it, to our design of the virtual reality. It's one of the reasons we began with the virtual reality, let alone then design for the consideration across the Chrome, iPad, and of course the wearable. So next, of course, has been how we get educators to use it. That's something called Voice Advisor. We've run out of time. That's a whole nother presentation. But the skinny is, folks, we've tried to assist educators with what's called Voice Advisor, and that's part of Project Voice. It's a website. So when you go to projectvoice.org, you'll see a connection over to the Voice Advisor. And the Voice Advisor is trying to assist educators now that the student has gained some understanding and some skill. How do they practice and generalize it in reality? And that's what Voice Advisor is trying to facilitate with evidence-based practices, with scenarios that allow for educators to contextualize between what they're experiencing with their own students and what we've been trying to illustrate within our domains. We can make the connection. We offer lesson plans and a variety of other things to facilitate that. We've run out of time, but if you're interested, feel free to contact us. There are our names again, there are email addresses. Be happy to talk to you more about, one, how do you access this product, which is in development, but it is available, and we'd love to talk to you about gaining access, potentially participating with us in some ongoing research we're doing and data collection that we'd be able to share with you at a higher level potentially that you would not get if you were just using the app. And of course, the advisor, and giving us feedback on the advisor, as well as us being able to engage you further on the advisor for that practice and generalization. So with that, though, I think we've maximized our time. We hope this was helpful. I hope the rest of the UDL-IRN is, or we hope the rest of the UDL-IRN is an awesome experience for you in terms of this conference. And just have a great day. Maggie, closing thoughts.
That's it. Thanks for attending, and feel free to reach out. Even if you're just interested in social skills in the development process, feel free to reach out and ask us.
All right. Have a great day.